My name is Elaine Carter, 62 years old, and I built my company from nothing into a multi-million-dollar business over 30 years. I've always believed hard work beats privilege, and I taught my daughter Samantha the same. But last Mother's Day changed everything when she gave her mother-in-law Victoria a $23,000 ring and a cruise while I received a $5 plastic flower. I accepted it graciously, hiding my hurt. Little did I know 24 hours later, my phone would explode with desperate calls from my daughter. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you believe family should be about love, not money, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how this story unfolds, because sometimes the most painful lessons become our greatest freedom. Growing up in South Chicago, learned early that nothing in life comes easy. My father worked at the steel mill, coming home with calloused hands and a tired smile. My mother cleaned houses for wealthy families along Lakeshore Drive. They taught me the dignity of hard work, but I always dreamed of building something of my own. By 12, I was selling handmade friendship bracelets to classmates, turning a small profit that I saved in a coffee can under my bed. In high school, I juggled 3 jobs: mornings at the local bakery, afternoons at the library, and weekends babysitting for neighbors. While other teenagers spent their money on clothes and movies, I invested mine in a small inventory of costume jewelry that I sold at weekend flea markets. My parents worried about my constant working. "Elaine, enjoy your youth," my mother would say. But I saw how they struggled to pay bills, how my father's back bent a little more each year from labor. I wanted something different. College wasn't an option financially, so I took business classes at the community center and read every book on entrepreneurship I could find at the public library. By 22, I had saved enough to rent a tiny storefront where I sold handcrafted jewelry and accessories I designed myself. That same year, I met David Williams at a Chamber of Commerce mixer. He was an accountant with a steady job and conservative values, attracted to my drive, but uncomfortable with my ambition. "A woman should focus on family first," he'd say, even as he admired my business sense. Despite our different views, we married 6 months later, thinking love would bridge our differences. When Samantha was born 2 years later, David assumed I would close my shop and stay home. Instead, I hired a part-time assistant and brought my infant daughter to work with me. I set up a playpen behind the counter and scheduled meetings during her nap times. Many nights I stayed up until dawn, stringing beads and designing new pieces while Samantha slept. "This isn't healthy for either of you," David would argue. But I saw my daughter watching me work, absorbing the lesson that women could be mothers and creators simultaneously. I wanted her to grow up knowing she never had to choose between family and dreams. My first big break came when a local boutique owner placed a substantial wholesale order. Suddenly, I needed manufacturing help beyond what I could produce by hand. I found a small workshop willing to create my designs and expanded into several more stores. David's discomfort grew along with my business. "I make enough to support us," he'd insist. "This business is taking you away from your role as a mother." The arguments escalated as my company did. When Samantha turned 8, everything came to a head after I received an offer to supply a national retail chain. "It's time to choose," David said one night after Samantha was asleep. "This family, or your business." The divorce was painful but necessary. David wanted a traditional wife. I couldn't shrink myself to fit that mold. Samantha cried when he moved out, not understanding why her family was fracturing. I promised myself that despite the separation, she would never lack for love or opportunities. Being a single mother while running a growing business pushed me to my limits. I missed school plays because of supplier meetings. I took conference calls in hospital waiting rooms when Samantha had ear infections. I scheduled international sourcing trips during her visits with David, but I also made sure we had sacred time together. Sunday brunches where phones were forbidden, annual summer road trips exploring national parks, and nightly reading sessions no matter how exhausted I was. I wanted Samantha to know that while my business required sacrifice, she remained my heart's priority. As my company expanded into multiple product lines and eventually its own chain of boutiques, our lifestyle improved dramatically. I moved us from our modest apartment to a beautiful home in a good school district. I enrolled Samantha in private school, paid for dance lessons, tennis camps, and European trips with her class. In those early teenage years, Samantha seemed proud of my accomplishments. She would bring friends to my office after school, watching with obvious admiration as I directed my growing team. "My mom built all this," she'd tell them, her voice tinged with awe. But as she entered high school, something shifted. Perhaps it was natural teenage rebellion or exposure to her classmates' more traditional family structures. But Samantha began comparing our life unfavorably to others. "Why can't you be like Melissa's mom? She's always there when Melissa gets home. Dad says your priorities are messed up." These comments stung, but I reminded myself that adolescence was difficult and temporary. I continued to build my company, which by then employed over 200 people and generated annual revenues exceeding $20 million. Though I hoped Samantha might someday join the business, she showed little interest in learning its operations. When I invited her to summer internships, she chose instead to travel with friends. When I suggested business courses in college, she opted for art history and literature. "Not everyone wants to be a CEO mom," she said dismissively when I inquired about her post-graduation plans. "Some people just want a normal life." I didn't push. After all, I had built the business so my daughter could have choices I never had. If she chose a different path, wasn't that the ultimate success of my sacrifice? But deep in my heart, I had always imagined passing my legacy to her, teaching her everything I had learned through decades of persistence. Each time she dismissed this possibility, a small part of me grieved a shared future that would never come to pass. Samantha's college years at Westfield University marked the first significant physical distance between us. The prestigious private school cost nearly $60,000 annually, an amount I could now afford, but that represented an investment in her future I was proud to make. During freshman orientation, I watched other parents embracing their children, exchanging tearful goodbyes. Samantha gave me a quick hug, already scanning the crowd for new friends. "I'll call you when I get settled," she said, walking away without looking back. Those calls became increasingly infrequent as she immersed herself in campus life. When we did speak, she shared sanitized versions of her experiences as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than the mother who had raised her alone. Still, I took pride in her academic achievements and growing independence. Wasn't this what I had worked so hard to provide? The freedom to create her own identity separate from mine? During her senior year, Samantha called with unusual excitement. "I've met someone, Mom. His name is Robert Preston." Moi. The name meant nothing to me then, but I would soon learn that the Prestons were old money, a family that had manufactured industrial equipment for generations. Their wealth wasn't built. It was inherited, maintained, and leveraged through strategic marriages and business alliances. When Samantha brought Robert home during spring break, I noticed how he surveyed our house with subtle appraisal. Though I had done well, my home lacked the ancestral gravitas of generational wealth. No oil paintings of stern-faced forebears hung in my foyer. No silver bearing a family crest graced my dinner table. "Your home is very comfortable, Mrs. Carter," Robert said, the slight pause conveying volumes. "Elaine, please," I corrected. "And thank you." I believe homes should be lived in, not just admired. Robert spoke confidently about joining his father's business after graduation. When I asked about his own ambitions, he seemed puzzled by the question. "The Preston name opens doors," he explained. "Why would I start from scratch when I have a ready-made future waiting?" I noticed how Samantha beamed at him, how she adopted his mannerisms and deferred to his opinions. My outspoken daughter had become uncharacteristically agreeable in his presence. 2 months later, I received an invitation to meet Robert's family at their summer home in Newport. The sprawling oceanfront property had been in the Preston family for over a century. Victoria Preston Roberts' mother greeted me with practiced charm that never reached her eyes. "Samantha has told us so much about your business," she said, making it sound like an unusual hobby. "How novel to build something from nothing. In our family, we focus on preserving legacy." Throughout the weekend, I felt the subtle current of exclusion. Conversations referenced people, places, and events unfamiliar to me. Inside jokes flew over my head. When I spoke about my company's recent expansion, interested questions were replaced with swift subject changes. "Mother thinks business talk is rather vulgar at social gatherings," Robert explained later, as if I'd committed a faux pas. The engagement announcement came shortly after graduation. The ring on Samantha's finger, a Preston family heirloom, sparkled with diamonds that had adorned generations of Preston wives. The engagement party at the Preston estate was an elaborate affair that left me feeling like an outsider at my own daughter's celebration. Victoria dominated the planning, relegating me to just another name on the guest list. When I offered to host a second gathering for my friends and business associates, Samantha gently declined. "Robert thinks it's better to have one perfect event than 2 lesser ones," she explained, not noticing how her words diminished my offer. The wedding planning followed the same pattern. Victoria secured the exclusive country club where Preston marriages had occurred for generations. She selected the florist, the photographer, the menu, all with minimal input from Samantha and none from me. When I suggested incorporating elements from my Polish heritage into the ceremony, Samantha looked uncomfortable. "The Prestons have certain traditions," she said apologetically. "Victoria thinks consistency is important for family history." I began noticing other changes in my daughter. Her wardrobe shifted from colorful creative pieces to muted designer labels that Victoria approved. Her formerly progressive political views softened to match the conservative Preston outlook. Even her laugh changed. The uninhibited cackle I loved replaced by a restrained, society-appropriate chuckle. Our traditional mother-daughter lunches were increasingly canceled last minute. "Victoria needs help with the charity gala," or "Robert's family has a sailing commitment they forgot to mention." Each time Samantha promised to reschedule, but those promises rarely materialized. When we did meet, Samantha spoke almost exclusively about the Prestons, their connections, their traditions, their expectations. It was as if she were studying for a role she desperately wanted to perfect. Once, when I mentioned a childhood memory of us making homemade pizza in our tiny apartment kitchen, Samantha changed the subject so quickly I felt whiplash. Later, I overheard her telling Robert on the phone, "No, I didn't mention growing up in South Chicago. You know how your mother feels about that area." My loyal assistant, Jessica, who had been with me for 15 years and had watched Samantha grow up, noticed the change. "She seems ashamed of where she came from," Jessica observed after Samantha had rushed through a brief office visit. "That girl used to proudly tell everyone her mother built an empire from scratch." I defended Samantha, making excuses about the adjustment to a new family, but privately, I wondered if I had somehow failed to instill the values I held dear, that character outranked pedigree, that achievement meant more than inheritance, that authenticity trumped social performance. The first Thanksgiving after the wedding, I prepared all of Samantha's favorite dishes, setting the table with new china I had purchased for the occasion. 2 hours before dinner, she called to cancel. Victoria insists we spend holidays with them. Family tradition, she explained. Maybe we can do lunch next week instead. I sat alone at my beautifully set table, looking at the empty chair where my daughter should have been. The pattern continued through Christmas, my birthday, and eventually Mother's Day. Mother's Day had always been special for us. Even during the most chaotic business years, we had maintained our tradition of spending the entire day together. When Samantha was young, she would wake me with handmade cards and breakfast attempts that ranged from charmingly inedible to surprisingly tasty. As she grew older, our celebrations evolved into spa days, museum visits, or cooking classes, experiences that created memories rather than accumulated possessions. This would be our first Mother's Day since her marriage, and despite the growing distance between us, I felt a flicker of hope that our tradition might survive. I made reservations at our favorite brunch spot, selecting a window table with a view of the lake that Samantha had always loved. 3 days before she called. About Sunday, Mom. I can't do brunch. Victoria has planned a whole Mother's Day weekend celebration at their lake house. I swallowed my disappointment. I understand. Family obligations are important. But I could do coffee before we leave, she offered. Maybe around 9. I'd love that, I said, clinging to the small concession. Sunday morning, I dressed carefully in a coral blouse Samantha had once complimented, applied light makeup, and styled my hair. Though coffee wasn't brunch, I was grateful for any time with my daughter on this day. At 9:30, still waiting at the cafe, I received a text. Running late, traffic. Be there by 10. I ordered another coffee and tried to quell my rising disappointment. Samantha finally rushed in at 10:15, designer sunglasses perched on her head, constantly checking her phone. Sorry, Mom. Crazy morning. Victoria kept calling about our departure time. It's fine, I assured her. I'm just happy to see you. She ordered a skinny latte but barely touched it. After a few minutes of distracted small talk, she reached into her designer bag and pulled out a small plastic flower, the kind sold at gas station checkout counters, and a card in an envelope that hadn't been sealed. Happy Mother's Day, she said, sliding them across the table. I opened the card to find a pre-printed message with only her name signed at the bottom. No personal note, no love you, just Samantha in hasty script. Thank you, sweetie, I said, masking my hurt. It's lovely. So guess what I got, Victoria? Samantha continued, eyes lighting up. Robert and I pooled our resources and bought her this amazing sapphire ring she's been eyeing. $23,000, but totally worth it for how happy she was. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. And we're sending her and Robert's dad on a Mediterranean cruise this summer. First-class airfare, balcony suite, the works. She literally cried when we told her. The contrast between the thoughtful, expensive gifts for her mother-in-law and the last-minute plastic flower for me was painfully clear. But I smiled and asked appropriate questions about the cruise itinerary. That sounds wonderful. Victoria must be thrilled. She is. She says I'm the daughter she never had. Samantha checked her phone again. Oh, shoot, I need to go. They're waiting to leave for the lake house. Our coffee had lasted less than 15 minutes. Of course, I said. Have a wonderful celebration. She gave me a quick hug and air kiss before rushing out, leaving me sitting alone with a $5 plastic flower and an unsigned card. I paid the bill and walked slowly to my car, memories flooding back of previous Mother's Days. 6-year-old Samantha proudly presenting a macaroni necklace she had made in school. 12-year-old Samantha saving her allowance for weeks to buy me a simple silver bracelet. 16-year-old Samantha writing a heartfelt letter about how my strength had inspired her own. When had that girl disappeared? When had my daughter's love become something measured in dollars with the bulk of her budget allocated to her new family? At home, I placed the plastic flower on my coffee table and sat looking at it, allowing myself to feel the hurt I had concealed at the cafe. Not because the gift was inexpensive. I had treasured handmade cards and childhood crafts far more than any luxury item, but because it represented so little thought or effort. It spoke of obligation fulfilled in the most minimal way possible. My phone rang. It was Jessica calling to wish me Happy Mother's Day. "How was coffee with Samantha?" she asked. "Brief," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's spending the day with Robert's family." Jessica's silence spoke volumes. "She gave me a nice little flower," I added, not wanting to invite pity. "And what did the Prestons get?" Jessica asked knowingly. When I told her about the ring and cruise, her outrage on my behalf was both comforting and embarrassing. "After everything you've done, the sacrifices you made, that girl has forgotten who moved heaven and earth to give her every opportunity. She's just trying to fit into their world," I said, making excuses I didn't fully believe. After we hung up, I wandered through my empty house past photos chronicling Samantha's life and my business milestones. Both had been labors of love. Both had required sacrifice and persistence. But while my company had grown stronger with time, my relationship with my daughter seemed to be withering. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider a future I had previously rejected, selling my company and retiring. For decades, I had assumed Samantha would eventually join the business, that my legacy would become hers. But it was increasingly clear she had chosen a different path, one that led away from me rather than toward the shared future I had envisioned. That night, I began researching business valuation methods, curious about what my life's work might be worth on the open market. The numbers that appeared on my screen were substantial. Enough to ensure financial security for the rest of my life, while also providing a significant inheritance for Samantha someday. An inheritance she apparently already counted as her due. Monday morning, I arrived at my office earlier than usual, seeking comfort in the familiar environment where my contributions were valued and my presence mattered. My administrative team had decorated my desk with fresh flowers and cards for Mother's Day, a gesture that touched me deeply after yesterday's disappointment. "Conference call with Meridian investors at 10, Jessica reminded me as she placed a coffee on my desk. "They're still interested in acquiring a minority stake." Meridian had been courting my company for months. Their initial interest had been flattering but not compelling enough to pursue. Now, with new perspective after yesterday's revelations, I found myself more open to the conversation. "Set it up in the main conference room," I said, "and pull together the latest valuation documents." The morning proceeded with routine efficiency. The Meridian call went well, with the investors increasing their offer substantially. What had begun as casual interest was evolving into a serious possibility. "They're eager to move forward," Jessica noted after the call. "And they mentioned the possibility of a complete acquisition rather than just a minority investment." "Let's explore that option," I replied, surprising both of us. Have legal draft a preliminary framework for what that might look like. As Jessica left to make arrangements, I noticed my phone lighting up with Samantha's name. Given our brief interaction yesterday, I was surprised to hear from her so soon. "With the Meridian documentation needing review." I let the call go to voicemail. 20 minutes later, she called again. And again. By early afternoon, I had 10 missed calls from my daughter, something unprecedented in recent years, when I was lucky to get a weekly text message. Between meetings, I checked my voicemail to find increasingly frantic messages. Mom, call me back as soon as you get this. It's important. Mom, seriously, I need to talk to you today. Please call back. Mom, I know you're there. This is an emergency. Call me. Concerned that something might truly be wrong, I asked Jessica to reschedule my next meeting and returned Samantha's call. She answered immediately. Finally. Why haven't you been picking up? I've been calling all day. I've been in meetings, Samantha. Is everything okay? Are you hurt? Is it true? She demanded, ignoring my questions. Is what true that you're selling the company Robert's friend works at Meridian, and he said they're finalizing an acquisition offer? Tell me that's not true. The accusatory tone in her voice sparked something in me. Not anger, but a sudden clarity about our relationship. I'm exploring options, I said carefully. Nothing has been decided. You can't sell. Her voice rose in panic. Mom, you have to take that offer off the table. The company is supposed to come to me eventually. The assumption behind her words was breathtaking. In all our conversations over the years, she had never expressed interest in running the business. She had declined internships, ignored my invitations to learn operations, and chosen a completely unrelated educational path. Samantha, you've never shown any interest in the company. You've made it clear this isn't the life you want. Of course I want the company, I just don't want to work there. There's a difference. The distinction she made was revealing and troubling. You want ownership without contribution, I clarified. Don't be dramatic. I just assumed that someday you know when you retire or whatever that Robert and I would inherit the company. We could hire people to run it while we receive the profits. That's how the Prestons have managed their business holdings for generations. The entitlement in her voice was so foreign to everything I had tried to teach her. Had this been her plan all along, to wait for a handout while investing all her relational energy in her in-laws? Samantha, the company isn't a trust fund. It's a living entity that needs active, engaged leadership. People's livelihoods depend on it. Please, Mom, she begged, her tone shifting from demanding to desperate. Don't sell the company. We're counting on that inheritance. We've made financial commitments based on it. What kind of commitments? I asked, suddenly suspicious. There was a pause. We bought a house in Lakewood Estates. The mortgage is significant. Robert's parents helped with the down payment, but they expected us to handle the monthly payments from my inheritance eventually. Lakewood Estates was the most exclusive neighborhood in the area, with homes starting at several $1,000,000, far beyond what Robert's entry-level position at his father's company could support. You purchased a home you can't afford based on an inheritance I never promised you. Don't act like this is a surprise. You've always said everything you did was for me. The company is supposed to be my legacy too. Legacy requires stewardship, Samantha. You've shown no interest in learning the business and understanding what it takes to keep it successful. So what you're punishing me for not wanting to be a workaholic like you, for choosing a different life? The accusation stung, but I maintained my composure. This isn't punishment. It's business reality. I have to consider what's best for the company and its employees. Your employees matter more than your own daughter. What about my future? What about your grandchildren someday? Samantha, I said firmly, I need to go. We can discuss this later when you're calmer. No. Mom, don't you dare hang up. You have to promise not to sell. Please, Mom, don't sell the company. I ended the call, my hand shaking slightly. Within seconds, my phone lit up again with her name. Then again, text messages began flooding in. Please, Mom, don't sell the company. We need that inheritance. Victoria will never forgive us if we lose the house. You're ruining my life. By day's end, there were 28 missed calls from Samantha and dozens of increasingly desperate text messages. I silenced my phone and focused on reviewing the Meridian documents, my mind clearer than it had been in years. That evening, I was preparing a simple dinner when my doorbell rang insistently. Looking through the peephole, I saw Samantha and Robert standing on my porch, both dressed as if they had come directly from his office. I opened the door, maintaining a calm I didn't entirely feel. "Samantha, Robert, this is unexpected. We need to talk," Robert said, his tone carrying the assurance of someone unaccustomed to being denied. "May we come in?" I stepped aside, allowing them into my living room. The plastic flower still sat on the coffee table where I had left it yesterday. "Mom," Samantha began immediately, "you have to reconsider this sale. Our entire future depends on the company staying in the family. Your future should depend on your own efforts," I replied evenly. "Not on waiting for an inheritance." Robert cleared his throat, straightening his designer tie. "Mrs. Carter, Elaine, perhaps I can offer some perspective here. In established families like mine, intergenerational wealth transfer is standard practice. Companies are assets to be passed down, not liquidated for short-term gain." His condescension was barely veiled, his assumption of financial superiority ironic given what Samantha had revealed about their precarious mortgage situation. "In my family, Robert," I countered, "we believe businesses thrive under the leadership of those who understand their operations and care about their people, not absentee owners collecting checks." Samantha's face flushed. "That's not fair. I would care about the company." "From your estate in Lakewood between charity galas with Victoria." "You're being deliberately difficult," Robert interjected. "Samantha is your only child. Who else would you leave your company to if not her? Perhaps to people who have demonstrated commitment to its mission, who have invested years of their lives building it alongside me. You'd leave your legacy to employees instead of your own daughter." Samantha's voice rose incredulously. "That's insane!" Before I could respond, the doorbell rang again. Through the window, I saw a luxury SUV parked behind Robert's sports car. Victoria and Charles Preston were walking up my driveway. "You brought your parents?" I asked, a new understanding dawning. "They wanted to help mediate," Robert explained, moving to open the door. Victoria swept in immaculately dressed in designer casual wear that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Charles followed, his patrician features set in an expression of benevolent authority. "Elaine, darling," Victoria air-kissed near my cheeks. "We thought this little family discussion could benefit from experienced voices." The presumption of inserting themselves into a private matter between my daughter and me was staggering, but I maintained my composure. "This is an unexpected crowd for a Monday evening. Well, when family fortunes are at stake, swift action is required," Victoria replied, taking a seat on my sofa without invitation. Her gaze fell on the plastic flower, and a small smile played at her lips. "How charming." Charles positioned himself near the fireplace, assuming a stance of authority. "Elaine, we understand you're considering selling your business. While we respect your right to make decisions, you may not fully appreciate the implications for Samantha and Robert." "I think I understand implications quite well, Charles. I've been running a successful company for 30 years. "Yes, and it's commendable what you've built from," he paused delicately, "humble beginnings. But family wealth requires strategic management across generations. The Prestons have maintained their position through careful planning. The Carters apparently prefer liquidation to legacy," Victoria added with subtle disdain. The dynamic in my living room suddenly crystallized with perfect clarity. The Prestons, all four of them, viewed my company as an asset they were entitled to control. Not because they had contributed to its growth or understood its operations, but simply because Samantha had married into their family. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice steady and strong. "My company is not a Preston asset. It's the result of decades of work, risk, and sacrifice. Concepts that might be unfamiliar to those who inherit rather than build." Victoria's smile tightened. "There's no need for hostility. We're simply trying to help Samantha secure what's rightfully hers." "And what gives you that impression, Victoria?" "Has Samantha shown any interest in learning the business? Has she spent even one summer interning to understand its operations? Has she expressed any vision for its future beyond funding her lifestyle?" "Not everyone needs to be hands-on," Charles interjected. "Strategic ownership is about delegation, not daily involvement." "In your world, perhaps," I countered. "In mine, leadership requires understanding what you're leading." Robert leaned forward, adopting a reasonable tone that I suspected he used in board meetings when explaining something he considered elementary. "Elaine, consider the practical reality. Samantha and I have made financial commitments based on the understanding that the company would eventually come to her. Our home, our position in the community, these depend on that inheritance." "An inheritance I never promised," I reminded him. "An assumption you made without consultation." "Mom." Samantha's voice cracked slightly. "Please, if you sell the company, we'll lose everything. The house are standing with Robert's family." She glanced nervously at Victoria. "Everything we've built." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw someone I barely recognized. The independent, spirited girl I had raised had been replaced by a woman whose self-worth seemed entirely dependent on material possessions and social approval. My gaze moved to the plastic flower on the coffee table. "Yesterday was Mother's Day," I said quietly. The non sequitur seemed to confuse them. "I received this $5 plastic flower and a card you didn't even bother to write a personal note in." I continued, looking directly at Samantha. "Victoria received a $23,000 ring and a luxury cruise. That disparity tells me everything I need to know about where your values currently lie." Victoria had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. "The gifts aren't important," Samantha protested weakly. "You're right. They're not. What matters is the thought, effort, and love behind them. For 30 years, I have poured everything into being both mother and father to you. I worked 80-hour weeks so you could have opportunities I never had. I attended every school event I possibly could. I made sure you never felt the financial insecurity I grew up with." I stood, indicating the conversation was ending. "The company is mine to direct as I see fit. If I choose to sell it, that decision will be based on what's best for the business and the people who have helped build it, not on funding a lifestyle you can't actually afford." "You're making a huge mistake," Charles warned. "This decision will damage your relationship with your daughter irreparably." I met his gaze steadily. "With respect, Charles, my relationship with my daughter was damaged long before tonight. Not by my business decisions, but by the values she's adopted since joining your family. Values that place appearance above authenticity and inheritance above effort." "How dare you?" Victoria began, but I held up my hand. "This conversation is over. I appreciate you all coming to express your concerns, but I'll ask you to leave now." "Mom, please," Samantha pleaded, tears forming. "Just think about it. Don't make any decisions yet." For a moment, I saw a glimpse of genuine emotion rather than calculation in her eyes, but I had drawn my line. "I'll always love you, Samantha. You're my daughter, but I won't be manipulated or guilted into decisions that compromise my integrity or the future of the company I've built." They left reluctantly, Victoria murmuring something to Charles about new money stubbornness. As I closed the door behind them, I felt an unexpected sense of liberation rather than loss. Later that night, I called Jessica. "How would you feel about retiring?" I asked. "Depends," she replied. "Are you thinking about accepting Meridian's offer?" "I'm thinking about accepting the right offer. Not Meridian's necessarily, but the one that best serves the company's future." "And Samantha?" I sighed. "She'll have to build her own future just as I did." Meeting with financial advisors the following week confirmed what I had suspected. My company was worth considerably more than even Meridian had offered. With the right buyer, I could ensure both financial security for myself and continued employment for my loyal team members. "Several potential acquirers have expressed interest," my advisor explained. "Some want to fold your brand into their existing operations, but others see value in maintaining your company's identity and leadership structure." I reviewed each proposal carefully, considering not just the dollar figures, but the philosophical alignment with how I had built my business. Some offers were financially superior, but would dismantle the culture I had created. Others preserved the company's integrity, but at a lower valuation. "I want to move forward with Westlake Partners," I decided after careful consideration. Their offer includes employment guarantees for existing staff and maintains our ethical sourcing commitments. As word of the potential sale spread through industry channels, I received a text from Samantha. "Can we talk just us?" We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe midway between our homes. When she arrived, I noticed subtle differences in her appearance. Simpler jewelry, less designer-focused clothing, hair pulled back in a casual ponytail rather than her recent salon-perfect style. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Of course," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. After ordering coffee, she fidgeted with her napkin before speaking. "I want to apologize for how everything happened the other night. Bringing Robert's parents was inappropriate." Yes, it was. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about values and appearances and effort." She looked up, meeting my eyes. "And about Mother's Day. I'm ashamed of how thoughtless I was." I remained silent, allowing her the space to continue. "The truth is, I've been caught up in the Preston world. Their expectations, their judgments. Victoria has very clear ideas about how things should be done, who matters, what constitutes success." She sighed. "It was easier to conform than to challenge." "I understand the pull of acceptance," I acknowledged. "But at what cost to your own identity?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." She hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Robert's family isn't as financially solid as they appear. Their company has been struggling for years. Charles has been liquidating assets quietly to maintain their lifestyle." This revelation wasn't entirely surprising given their aggressive interest in my company's future. "They saw my potential inheritance as a solution to their problems," Samantha continued. "Victoria especially. That's why she's been so invested in me. In us. And the expensive gifts, the ring and cruise." Samantha looked down. "Mostly for show. The ring is on credit, and the cruise is the lowest tier package, but she tells everyone it's the premium suite." She laughed humorlessly. "Appearances, always appearances. And your house in Lakewood Estates. We're underwater on the mortgage already. The down payment Victoria and Charles provided was actually a loan, not a gift. With interest." She looked miserable. "I've made such a mess of everything, Mom. trying to be someone I'm not, impressing people who only valued me for what I might bring them financially. What are you asking of me, Samantha? Nothing, she said quickly. I'm not here to ask you not to sell. That's your decision and you're right. I've never earned a place in the company's future. Then why are you here? Because I miss my mom, she said simply, tears filling her eyes. I miss Sunday brunches and honest conversations and not calculating the value of every interaction. I miss being real. Ciao. Her vulnerability seemed genuine, but trust once broken isn't easily restored. I appreciate your honesty, I said carefully. But rebuilding our relationship will take time and consistent effort from both of us. I know, she nodded. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I just want a chance to find a new way forward. As she left, she hugged me, a real embrace, not the air kisses she had adopted since her marriage. It felt both familiar and strange, a memory of connection rather than its full restoration. The following week, I moved forward with the sale to Westlake Partners. The agreement included generous provisions for my employees, ensuring their job security during the transition. Jessica decided to retire alongside me, our professional partnership evolving into a deeper friendship. What will you do now? She asked as we cleared out our offices. Travel, relax, finally take up that pottery class you've been talking about for 10 years. All of the above, I laughed. And maybe discover who Elaine Carter is when she's not running a company or raising a daughter. Whoever she is, Jessica said warmly, I bet she's pretty amazing. 6 months after selling my company, I moved into a beachfront home I had purchased in a quiet coastal town. The constant sound of waves provided a soothing backdrop as I explored interests long deferred. Watercolor painting, kayaking, volunteering at the local literacy center. For the first time in decades, my schedule belonged entirely to me. Jessica visited often, sometimes staying for weeks, as we took road trips up the coast or simply enjoyed peaceful days reading on the deck. Other friends from my business days reconnected as well, our relationships deepening now that they weren't confined to rushed lunches between meetings. Samantha and I maintained cautious contact, weekly phone calls, occasional text messages, the stilted formality between us gradually softening as she shared honest struggles rather than curated highlights. Robert and I are downsizing, she told me during one call. We've sold the Lakewood house at a loss, but at least we're out from under that mortgage. How does that feel? I asked. Honestly, liberating. The pressure of maintaining appearances was exhausting. She and Robert had moved to a modest townhouse and were adjusting to living within their actual means. His parents had responded to their scaled-back lifestyle with disappointment bordering on disdain. Victoria barely speaks to me now, Samantha admitted. Apparently, I was only worthy of attention when I had potential access to your company. And Robert? He's actually doing better with less pressure. He's taken a position with a different firm where he's judged on his own merits, not as Charles Preston's son. It's been good for him. For us. On my birthday in February, an unexpected package arrived. Inside was a hand-knitted scarf in my favorite shade of teal, accompanied by a card covered in Samantha's handwriting. Not a hasty signature, but a full page of heartfelt reflections on our relationship and her hopes for its healing. I've been taking knitting classes, she explained when I called to thank her. It's not perfect. There are definitely some dropped stitches, but I made it myself with you in mind the whole time. The imperfect scarf meant infinitely more than any expensive gift she could have purchased. It represented time, thought, and personal effort, the very elements that had been missing from the plastic flower. In April, Samantha asked if she could visit for a weekend. She arrived alone, explaining that she and Robert had agreed they each needed to work on their family relationships individually before combining them again. The first evening was slightly awkward, both of us careful with our words. But by the second day, as we walked along the beach collecting shells, something of our old connection began to resurface. "I've been thinking a lot about value lately," Samantha said as we watched the sunset from my deck. "Not monetary value, but what makes relationships valuable? What makes a life meaningful?" "And what have you concluded?" I asked. "That I had it all backward. I thought value came from external validation, from the Preston approval, from the right address, from expensive gifts that impressed people." She looked at me directly, "But real value comes from effort, from showing up consistently, from actually caring, not just performing, caring for an audience." "That's a difficult lesson to learn," I acknowledged. "One many people never grasp." "I learned it from you originally," she said quietly. "I just forgot for a while, getting caught up in a world that measures worth differently. The plastic flower versus the sapphire ring." She reached for my hand. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for taking you for granted, for treating your love and sacrifice as my entitlement rather than the gifts they were." "We all lose our way sometimes," I said, squeezing her hand. "The important thing is finding the path back." That evening we cooked dinner together, a simple pasta dish like the ones we used to make in our tiny apartment kitchen when she was a child. No pretension, no performance, just two women chopping vegetables and sharing stories. As months passed, our relationship continued its careful rebuild. For Thanksgiving, I invited Samantha and Robert to my beach house. To my surprise, she called asking if they could host instead in their modest new home. "It won't be fancy," she warned. "No heirloom china or sterling silver, but it will be real." The dinner was indeed simple. A small turkey, homemade sides, pumpkin pie, slightly over-browned at the edges. But the conversation was genuine, the laughter authentic. Robert, away from his family's influence, revealed a warmer personality and self-deprecating humor I hadn't seen before. As the holiday season approached, Samantha called with news. "Victoria reached out," she said. "Now that the Preston company is publicly struggling, she's suddenly interested in reconnecting." "And how do you feel about that?" "Cautious," Samantha replied. "I'm willing to have a relationship with her, but not one based on what she thinks I can provide financially or socially. I've learned that lesson the hard way." "That's a healthy boundary," I observed. "I learned about boundaries from you too, Mom. When you stood your ground that night in your living room, even with all of us pressuring you. That took real strength." On Christmas morning, we exchanged gifts via video call. I had sent Samantha a simple silver necklace with a small lighthouse pendant. "To help you navigate," the card read. She had sent me a handmade photo album chronicling our life together with thoughtful captions acknowledging the sacrifices I had made and the love that had motivated them. The final page held a recent photo of us on my beach deck, arms around each other, the sunset painting the sky behind us. Beneath it, she had written, "Some things can't be measured in dollars. Thank you for teaching me what really matters." I keep that album on my coffee table now next to the plastic flower I preserved as a reminder, not of hurt, but of the journey we've taken together. From misalignment to understanding, from materialism to meaning, from performance to authenticity. Life rarely follows the paths we envision. The company I built didn't become the generational legacy I once imagined. My relationship with my daughter experienced a fracture I never anticipated. But in that breaking and rebuilding, we both discovered truths about ourselves and each other that might have remained hidden in smoother circumstances. I've learned that sometimes the most valuable gifts come disguised as disappointments, That worth isn't determined by price tags, but by the heart behind the giving. That boundaries aren't walls to keep people out, but foundations that allow authentic relationships to grow. If your family relationships have been complicated by money expectations or misaligned values, know that healing is possible. It requires honesty boundaries and the courage to prioritize authenticity over appearance. It means valuing effort over expense, intention over impression. Have you experienced similar challenges with family members who measure love differently than you do? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Please, like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life journeys through difficult family dynamics, and share with someone who might need to hear that real value can't be measured in dollars. Thank you for being part of this community where we can share our truths and support each other's growth.